West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
For 3 years, criminals were using an encrypted app to plot crimes ranging from drug trafficking to murder. They thought they were in a safe space. Well, it turns out the app was covertly monitored by Australia's federal police, the FBI, as well as other agencies. The result, hundreds of arrests in more than a dozen countries and the seizure of weapons, as well as drugs, and tens of millions of dollars. Senior international correspondent Ivan Watson has been tracking the case for us and joins us now from Hong Kong. And Ivan, talk us through how this sting worked, how communications were intercepted to begin with.
You've got law enforcement bodies, Issa, in at least 18 countries that are claiming credit for creating a digital Trojan horse, an encrypted messaging platform actually created, they say, by the FBI that was adopted unwittingly by narco traffickers, and it was monitored real time by police in different countries. And they announced today that they were carrying out hundreds of arrests in different countries around the world, cracking down really hard on these suspected criminals. The police in Australia have been busy.
Police search warrant, open the door!
Raiding homes, seizing tons of drugs, tens of millions of dollars in cash, more than 100 guns, and conducting hundreds of arrests.
We allege they are members of outlaw motorcycle gangs, Australian mafia, Asian crime syndicates, and serious and organised crime groups. We allege they have been trafficking illicit drugs into Australia at an industrial scale.
The crackdown in Australia, part of a parallel investigation with the FBI, rolling out across at least 18 countries.
The Australian government, as part of a global operation, has struck a heavy blow against organised crime, not just in this country, but one that will echo around organised crime around the world.
The FBI's man in Australia says law enforcement fooled criminal gangs by targeting their communications.
When criminal organizations have to engage in the logistics of moving their illicit materials, their money, organizing violence, all of that activity has to happen over a communications platform of some kind.
Australian law enforcement say hundreds of suspected criminals communicated on customized phones equipped with an encrypted messaging app called Anom. That app was essentially created by the FBI and decrypted by the Australian Federal Police.
We introduced a dedicated encrypted communications device into the global criminal marketplace.
This animated video distributed by the Australian Police explains the operation.
The customised phones were used by alleged senior crime figures, which gave other criminals the confidence to use the platform. You had to know a criminal to get hold of one of these customised phones. The phones couldn't ring or email, it could only communicate with someone on the same platform.
For nearly 3 years, law enforcement say they've monitored these communications.
Essentially, we have been in the back pockets of organised crime and operationalised a criminal takedown like we have never seen.
Thanks to the app, Australian police say they intercepted a planned mass shooting while acting on at least 21 threats to kill. Meanwhile, authorities across Europe, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK say they've also joined the operation, conducting their own raids and arrests. With the roundup continuing around the world, police predict criminals may start turning on each other as decrypted messages reveal their secrets. Now, part of how this sting operation was unfolded was that the law enforcement bodies were able to bring down a previous encrypted communications platform called Phantom Secure a number of years ago. And the Australian Federal Police say that the FBI and the AFP worked together to kind of fill the void with this new app called Anom. And evidently, it's the criminal gangs themselves that started adopting it. This, again, according to the police. They were spread basically by word of mouth, and the criminals actually had to pay subscription fees to syndicates to be able to use these specially configured phones, none of them knowing that law enforcement was reading their messages, again, in real time. And the Australian authorities say that they think that a number of cold cases might be unlocked and solved by the evidence that they've been able to gather through this operation. But they also point out that only a fraction of the organized crime out there is believed to use this platform, suggesting that there's an awful lot more still out there, still undiscovered, Isa.
And on that point, Ivan, if it was, so successful and so devastatingly effective, why not just keep going with this operation? Why end it and reveal their findings? Why not keep it going?
Well, the authorities say they had to act on a number, at least 21 suspected death threats. And they also point out that they may have saved a family of 5 in Australia that could have been hit in a mass shooting that there had been chatter about. So that may have contributed, something like that. But I want to stress the fact that the rollout of this announcement has been very carefully choreographed, with a press conference in Australia and then in Europe from Europol, and then expected in a number of hours from now from the FBI in the US. The Australians actually had a number of videos ready, scripted videos to roll out, including an animated segment that we showed a piece of. So that just illustrates that they've been preparing for this for some time, and it's quite a victory lap. It's very clear that they're very pleased with what they've accomplished here, that they have been conducting arrests in the months leading up to this, and they also insist that there will be more arrests in the months to come.
Why are we finding out about this now, Ivan? Has it simply run its course, that they've utilised it as much as they needed to? It seems a shame almost, if it was proving to be so useful, that we're now finding out about it.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the announcements are being rolled out in Australia and in New Zealand first. There was a press conference with Europol announcing that around a dozen European countries that were also involved in this. And then we're expecting in the hours to come that one of the FBI offices is going to make their own statements about their participation in this international operation, which also has different names depending on which country and which jurisdiction is involved with here. The Australians say that they were already making arrests leading up to this announcement. They also hint that perhaps a number of cold cases can be solved with the evidence that they've been gathering from the app, and perhaps from testimonies that they may get from some of the suspects if, for example, they flip on each other. But there's an additional point here that the Australian police commissioner made, and that is that only a fraction of the criminal underworld out there actually uses this app, Anom, and there's much more of this kind of communication out there. So this might be just the tip of the iceberg, even though it's been a very successful day, apparently, for law enforcement around the world.
It is Wednesday, the 9th of June of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Why can't we just have our lovely, smooth, velvety hollandaise on our lovely egg dish and be left alone? Jeez. Maybe even put a little bit of, parsley on it too. Chopped up very fine. Okay, well, we can't have that, but what do we do have? Are we going to get our potholes fixed? Our bridges repaired? Our dams patched? Reinforced? Oh my God. Let alone all the other things that we need to have, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you might even throw in protection of property, because how can you have any of that unless you take care of your infrastructure? It looks like the infrastructure bill is on the dust heap, the dustbin heap of history. Bipartisanship has been thrown right out the door. Mitch McConnell just said so, too. It's over. Bipartisanship is over. Actually, I think that even though Joe Biden, told Capito, is that her name? Look, this round of negotiations is over. I heard that there's another group that's coming in that he's trying to work into a bipartisan agreement. I don't know. We keep giving them everything. Merrick Garland says, hey, we won't hold anybody accountable for any of the crimes that happened. Can we just have an infrastructure bill? I don't think Merrick Garland's saying that. But, you could hold that up as like a negotiating tool. Oh, come on. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. Boy, are we in a pile of deep doo-doo. That's one way of putting it. Yes, indeed. Actually, I thought the law was the law. And I don't think arguing the institutional prerogatives of an institution when there's a Nazi takeover, and the Nazi takeover pretty much says we don't give a whit about your institution, but we're going to use the rules of protocol and parliamentary procedure to dismantle it and use the game against you. So, I don't know, Merrick. Are we going to be that much of an institutionalist? If you were a true institutionalist, maybe you might use the Constitution to guide you here. Do private citizens, even in their capacity as President of the United States, have the right to malign a private citizen without repercussions? Now, I've heard the comparison of the mailman using his mail truck as they are going about their appointed rounds. The use of that mail truck is the proper use of a government function. But if that mailman were to use the mail truck in the commission of a crime, or to put up banners saying, F you, E. Jean Carroll, you're a lying slut, would it be argued that that truck was still being used in the lawful commission of a government function? I would say, and others have, that no. And in fact, there's case law to prove as such. But Nazis don't care about case law, do they? The only thing they care about is the enabling acts. And the way we do the enabling acts here in the United States of America is to do nothing. To do nothing enables. And it has every time. We've enabled them from the time Nixon treasonously conspired with the North Vietnamese to hold up the peace talks in Paris so it would align his political prospects in the United States a whole lot better. We let him get away with that, and now look where we are. They've gotten away with it every single time, even, I would say, with Nixon getting run out of office. He wasn't kicked out, he was run out. And yeah, there were some people that paid a price and went to prison. And their acolytes, and I'm looking at you, Manafort, Stone, and, Lee Atwater's dead now, but they were a lobby shop, the three of those, to right what they call the wrongs of Watergate. And we let them get away with it. And now look where we are. So we got our work cut out for us. Will voting be enough? They're trying everything they can to make sure that voting doesn't occur anymore. So yeah, Joe wants to get an infrastructure bill. And, come back with a number. But a reasonable number, not like a fraction of a fifth of what Joe put out there. Joe wasn't aiming that high. Voting rights? Oh yeah, I can't have that. Too partisan. Voting is too partisan. While they redistrict, they suppress the vote. Mitch McConnell out last night saying, it's already illegal to, keep somebody from voting because of their race. Yeah, it's already illegal and you're getting away with it, aren't you? And he's laughing in our face. We're already racist Fs and you haven't done F about it. What do you think? What? This voting rights bill is going to make us all quiver in our boots and stop being racist? Get out of here. We're Nazis and we're taking over the government. Okay, master race. Uh-huh. All right. Like I said, we're in deep doo-doo. And I'm not saying any of this to dissuade people from voting. No, we have to vote in extremely enormous numbers, even more extremely enormous than the extremely enormous numbers that we had in just this last election. I mean, presidential. Because apparently we had an election just last night in various parts of the country. And from what I've heard, we haven't fared that badly, actually. People are mad. I've even heard it said that in Joe Manchin's state, the 70% would like to have that infrastructure bill passed. And where is Joe Manchin? Well, I don't know. Is it more the money from his daughter's EpiPen profiteering, or the several $1,000 that he gets from the Koch brothers and others? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it is a pretty good haul. Maybe he got about $15,000 from 3 rich billionaires. Well, billionaires are already rich. I meant, like 3 rich families in the right-wing universe. The right-wing universe. We know who they are. Petersons, Kochs, DeVosses, and others, too. There's lots of them. I love the economic anxiety of the very rich. Yeah, they cannot give up their racism because they were appointed by God, and you can tell by all the money that they've been able to steal. And I call it stealing. Anyway, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Speaking of stealing, for nearly 3 years, an encrypted app used by criminals was covertly monitored by the FBI and Australia's federal police. And we reported briefly upon that yesterday in the Chef's Table part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And so that was quite an illuminating breakdown about how it was done for 3 years. Now, that could portend something rather ominous on the other hand, too. Because if they're doing it with, an encrypted app that it sounds like law enforcement made up themselves, sort of like one of those fake storefronts. Oh, yeah, we're a pawn shop. Come on in. We'll take your stolen booty. Yeah. And then they bust the people. First, what they do is they take the stolen booty, find out who the stolen booty people are and who their friends are, and move their way up the chain. And this is a similar thing in the digital realm of what the U.S. and Australia, and it looks like a few other countries did as well. So why do I say that portends for something ominous? Because if they're able to do it on like some weird app that no one's ever heard about except a bunch of crooks, international though they be. I guess they can do it on all sorts of other things, like your regular Android phone or even your iPhone. Okay. So you used to be like, don't say anything online that you would want your grandmother to hear. Okay. Well, maybe you ought to think about your grandmother being in the FBI. Then you really don't want her to hear it then, do you? On the rest of the menu, the Senate overwhelmingly passed a bill to boost the U.S. tech industry to counter overseas rivals. Well, that was a nice lead-in from the previous story, wasn't it? The Biden Family Reunification Task Force said it has found nearly all the children separated under Trump's cruel border policy. And after 4 years of self-dealing, catering to the fossil fuel industry, and moving its headquarters from D.C. to Grand Junction, Colorado in the dead of the night, Republicans are irate. Biden's nominee to head the Bureau of Land Management was once a longtime Democratic aide who volunteered for a clean water group once. Oh, she's so partisan. Oh, my. The outrage that these fellas and gals can manufacture is just quite astounding, even in these perilous times. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the UN Security Council gave its unanimous backing to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for a second term. And the butcher of Bosnia lost his final legal battle when UN judges rejected his appeals and affirmed his life sentence. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and that chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. And she is making arrangements to get to D.C. for Netroots Nation. Just letting everybody know it's in D.C. this year, so we'll see how it goes. Apparently, there may not be a Radio Row this year. Is it because of COVID restrictions still? Or are they moving in a different direction? Well, we'll find out. You won't stop, journalism in any of its permutations from Netroots Nation. We'll be there anyway. Okay, thank you, Kelly. Now, if you folks would look across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, from that chat room link to the left, if you would then find the Patreon link, that's there because, we pay our bills. And though we pull out of our wallets the bulk of how we keep this little powerhouse of resistance going, we would still be unable to do it without you. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we're able to put those dollars in the kitty, and then we pay our bills. And we fly under the radar. And we resist this Nazi takeover of the United States of America. And I'm not being hyperbolic either. I'm not. And thank you for your generosity to all of those of you who recently had increased their donations. Thank you for that. It came at a perilous time for us, and we had to get a bit of machinery to keep this powerhouse of resistance going, and we still do, of course, because that's how planned obsolescence works. Anyway, thank you for that window of help. It really did help, and thank you for continuing your patronage to Netroots Radio. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's so simple. Tom takes care of it, and you can find us at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom. Find me at Justice Putnam on Twitter. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Let's see. Oh, yeah, maybe in about 10 days or less, I'll be back on Facebook for however long, we don't know. It probably won't be very long because there's a lot of stuff coming down. Yeah, as soon as something big happens, they get rid of a bunch of liberal voices who might agitate the Nazis even more just by our presence. Yeah, that must be it. Okay, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts. Please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. There's also a link to the Spreaker podcast platform in the show notes and links diary. Indeed. Alrighty, let's dive in. Let's tuck in. Yeah, we'll tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Did I tell you it's Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Well, it is. And it looks like Kevin Freaking, or is it Frecking, from the Associated Press brings us this first offering. And reporters and journalists out there, if I butcher, mangle your names, I apologize, really, from the depth of my soul. The Senate overwhelmingly approved a bill yesterday, Tuesday, that aims to boost U.S. semiconductor production and the development of artificial intelligence, and other technology in the face of growing international competition, most notably from China. Oh, really? Now, the 68-32 vote for the bill demonstrates how confronting China economically is an issue that unites both parties in Congress. Oh, we found our Goldstein! That's a rarity in an era of division as pressure grows on Democrats to change Senate rules to push past Republican opposition and gridlock. The centerpiece of the bill is a $50 billion emergency allotment to the Commerce Department to stand up semiconductor development and manufacturing through research and incentive programs previously authorized by Congress. The bill's overall cost would increase spending by about $250 billion, with most of the spending occurring in the first 5 years. Research and development. Supporters described it as the biggest investment in scientific research that the country has seen in decades. It comes as the nation's share of semiconductor manufacturing globally has steadily eroded from 37% in 1990 to about 12% now. And as a chip shortage has exposed vulnerabilities in the U.S. supply chain. The premise is simple. If we want American workers and American companies to keep leading the world, the federal government must invest in science, basic research, and innovation, just as we did decades after the Second World War, said Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Whoever wins the race to the technologies of the future is going to be the global economic leader with profound consequences for foreign policy and national security as well. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said the bill was incomplete because it did not incorporate more Republican-sponsored amendments. He nonetheless supported it. Amendments had nothing to do with semiconductor development, of course, Needless to say, final passage of this legislation cannot be the Senate's final word on our competition with China, McConnell said. It certainly won't be mine. President Joe Biden applauded the bill's passage in a statement last evening, Tuesday evening, saying, as other countries continue to invest in their own research and development, we cannot risk falling behind. America must maintain its position as the most innovative and productive nation on earth. Well, how about we stop floating these ideas that, coronavirus is a bioweapon because evolution doesn't exist? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay, we might also invest a little bit in STEM programs so that we have more scientists coming up. And how about this? Don't semiconductors use a tremendous amount of power overall? Where are we going to get that power? We can't burn coal. We're running out of fossil fuels, and we're finding out it's probably not good for the atmosphere. Where are we going to generate that electricity? The mind reels. Next offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by the Associated Press by way of the American Independent. The Biden administration said yesterday, Tuesday, that it has identified more than 3,900 children separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border under Trump's zero-tolerance policy on illegal crossings, providing one of the more detailed accounts of a chapter in U.S. immigration history that drew widespread condemnation. The Biden administration's Family Reunification Task Force, their count of 3,913 children separated from July 1st of 2017 to the end of Trump's term is well below more than the 5,500 children identified by the ACLU in court filings based on government information. The task force said it identified nearly all children who were separated under the zero-tolerance policy, but will review another 1,723 cases since July of 2017, which would then bring the total cases examined to 5,636. And that was pretty darn close to the ACLU tally. The discrepancy appears to stem largely from a federal court ruling in San Diego that excluded 1,723 children who were separated for reasons other than Trump's zero-tolerance policy, such as risk of child endangerment or questions about parentage. The task force will also try to determine if children were separated during the first 6 months of Trump's term, starting in January 2017, which was outside the scope of the ACLU lawsuit that could raise the final number. The Biden administration has vowed to reunite parents who are still apart from their children, but the pace has been slow, and it is unclear how high that number will go. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. President Joe Biden's nominee to oversee vast expanses of U.S. public lands was criticized yesterday, Tuesday, by Republicans over her past involvement in partisan politics as a longtime Democratic aide and environmentalist, underscoring the importance lawmakers assign to a relatively small agency with broad influence over energy development and agriculture in western states. Senate confirmation of Tracy Stone Manning to direct the U.S. Bureau of Land Management would mark a stark change from the government's catering to oil and gas interests from former President Donald Trump. It would take every Senate Republican plus at least one Democratic lawmaker to block her nomination. So far, No Democratic defectors have emerged, and we're looking at you, Joe and Kristen. The Land Bureau has been in staffing turmoil after 4 years without a confirmed director and losing nearly 300 employees to retirement or resignation when its headquarters was relocated from Washington, D.C. to Grand Junction, Colorado. Interior Department officials confirmed yesterday, Tuesday, that only 3 workers, that's 1, 2, 3, ultimately relocated to Grand Junction. The revelation, first reported by the media outlet Colorado Newsline, marks the latest example of the heavy toll on the federal workforce from a broad reorganization of government under Trump, which left agencies hobbled as they regulated industry and conducted climate research. In other words, they were just deconstructing the administrative state for a hostile foreign power. I guess we won't hold them to account, because that would be partisan, wouldn't it? Darn. Well, let's go to our break then. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
The world may have just come to understand the nature of disease epidemics over the last year. But for more than 2 decades, David Earn has been working on his own understanding of infectious diseases, and he's using math to explain it all.
And I'm particularly interested in patterns of epidemics that have occurred in the past and see what we can understand about disease spread in the past and hope to learn about disease spread in the future from that.
Earn is an applied mathematician at Ontario's McMaster University. His research explores factors that contribute to how diseases spread among people. And he's become an expert in tracking down the historic documents about long-ago epidemics that still hold mathematical clues we can learn from today. Key to all this is his team's knack for digital sleuthing. Early on in his career, Earn recognized that he could uncover numbers of deaths and their causes in Europe by sifting through piles of old records. They're called bills of mortality, and he's found thousands of them.
If we were to look over time at all of them, they were published weekly over hundreds of years, we'd see a pattern, and that would be potentially very enlightening.
Earn started looking for one such pattern in London during the 1660s. That's when a pestilence called the Great Plague ripped through the city. Bubonic plague was the culprit. It's an infectious disease spread by rat-biting fleas. Earn knew all about that, but what he didn't know was what the pattern of transmission looked like over time.
So typical epidemics, what happens is a pathogen enters a population, somebody's infected and may infect others. And initially, when almost everybody is susceptible to the infection, you see exponential growth of cases or deaths or both. But eventually, so many people have been infected and become immune that the epidemic turns over. And, you start to see a reduction in the number of cases each day or each week or however.
If, like David Earn, you plot out the number of cases over time for an individual epidemic, you'll see an exponential rise and then a turnover and then another rise and so on.
It's kind of like a skewed bell.
And that plot can answer a lot of questions.
How quick that exponential rises at the beginning. How high does it go? How rapidly does it turn over? The structure of the epidemic, what's called the epidemic curve, which is what I'm describing.
The answers to some of these questions were sitting hidden in plain sight for centuries at London's Guildhall Library. That's where Earn and his team found hundreds of pages of yellowing parchment. The city, as it turns out, started its own health surveillance system back in the early 1600s. Now Ern and the rest of his team had access to weekly plague death counts in each of the 130 parishes that made up the city. The death counts were key to understanding the speed of spread, but the fact that they were tied to a spatial grid gave them something more. It revealed the movements of an invisible killer. Ern and colleagues found that the number of deadly infections doubled every 11 days. He was also able to tease out very strong evidence that a wave of death washed from the outskirts into the city center over a period of many months in 1665. In a year and a half, a quarter of the population of one of Europe's largest cities was dead. The human toll was shocking, but what the team still didn't know was how this compared to epidemics that played out centuries earlier.
The period of which the bills of mortality cover captures the Great Plague of London and a number of plague epidemics that occurred earlier. But we know there were earlier plague epidemics, but no chance of finding mortality records before 1538 because the deaths weren't registered.
Ern was again stumped. How could he and his colleagues find out more about the dynamics of plague and its spread prior to the 1530s? On a whim, a colleague simply did a Google search for digitized last wills and testaments and found thousands more documents. They used the dates those wills were written as a proxy for the date of death.
If you plot them up, so this is daily counts of wills, and you can see clearly all 4 known plague epidemics in the 14th century, and that was really exciting.
Through this new method, Ern discovered that the number of people killed by plague doubled only every 43 days during the Black Death. It was the most deadly plague epidemic in human history, and it peaked in Europe between 1347 and 1351. Even so, the disease wasn't moving through the population nearly as fast as Ern found that it was later in the 1660s.
There was such a big difference in the growth rate or the doubling time for a disease that, as far as we can tell, didn't evolve in a significant way. It spread 4 times as fast in the 17th century than in the 14th century. That's not a small difference. That's a huge change, a doubling time of around 10 days rather than several weeks.
The team isn't entirely sure exactly why the Great Plague in the 17th century spread 4 times faster than it did in the 1300s. The population in London increased from roughly 50,000 to 500,000 over those 3 centuries. They also suspect the weather might have played a role.
The wealthy were more congregated in the center later on. And the minimum of the Little Ice Age was actually in the 1600s. And so it was cooler during the Great Plague than during the invasion of the Black Death.
Colder temperatures could have meant that people spent more time indoors, in close quarters. You only have to look at the winter waves of our coronavirus epidemic to understand why that can contribute to faster spread. Regardless of the details, the work has paid other dividends. Ern and colleagues have compiled a digitized archive of all of the historic documents they were able to scrape for data, a valuable data source for others also trying to understand the ways pandemics can spread. They've also developed 2 different software tools to forecast infectious disease outbreaks and to study growth rates in real time for outbreaks like COVID-19.
And we've been using it since the start of the epidemic in order to estimate growth rates and doubling times for COVID.
The new software may have been developed with centuries-old data, but the real-time information it's producing now informs policymakers and officials on the front lines of the global pandemic we're all experiencing right now. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I can't breathe, sir. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. These all too familiar words were the last ones spoken to police officers by 33-year-old Manuel Ellis in Tacoma, Washington on March 3, 2020, 3 weeks before the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Tacoma police officers tasered, handcuffed, and hogtied Ellis, put a spit hood over his head, hit him repeatedly, and held him down so that he could not breathe. At the end of May 2021, 2 of the police officers involved were charged with second-degree murder, and a third was charged with first-degree manslaughter. The local medical examiner, who noted Ellis's enlarged heart and methamphetamine intoxication as contributing factors, classified Ellis's death as a homicide, attributing that death to lack of oxygen caused by the police. The Tacoma Police Union characterized the criminal charges as a, quote, politically motivated witch hunt, and the officers as fine public servants, and predicted acquittal. There is this evidence with which the defendant officers will need to contend. Manuel Ellis repeatedly told the cops, "I can't breathe, sir," and those words were captured by a home security camera, as was one of the officers' response. "Shut the up, man." It's only the beginning stage of the criminal prosecution, but we can say this much with certainty. At least in some jurisdictions, death at the hands of the police will be investigated and prosecuted. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
A recent headline blared, "Labor shortages end when wages rise." Gosh, Captain Obvious, what an amazing discovery. Someone notify the Nobel Prize Committee, for surely this revolutionary revelation will win this year's prize in economics. Better yet, someone notify that gaggle of Republican governors whose theory of labor economics begins and ends with a medieval demand that workers be whacked with a stick to make them do what the bosses want. At issue is the furious complaint by restaurant chains, nursing homes, big ag, and other low-wage employers that they have a critical labor shortage. It seems that millions of workers today are hesitant to take jobs because there's no affordable child care, or the jobs they're offered expose them and their families to COVID-19, or the work itself is abusive and demeaning, or all of the above. Business chieftains wail that they've been advertising thousands of jobs for waiters, poultry workers, nursing assistants, and such, but they can't get enough takers. So corporate-serving governors have rushed to their rescue, shouting, "Whack 'em with a stick!" These mingy politicians are stripping away jobless benefits, trying to force workers to take any crappy job they're offered. It gives new meaning to the term workforce. But wait, there's an honest way to get the workers they need. Offer fair wages. As the owner of a small chain of restaurants in Atlanta notes, when he stopped lowballing wages, he not only got the workers he needed, but we started to get a better quality of applicants. That translated to better service, happier customers, and more business. This is Jim Hightower saying, if you treat employees as cheap, that's what you'll get. But if you view them as valuable assets, that's what they'll be, and you'll all be better off. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by our new Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe, with kick-ass political spark plugs like Beto O'Rourke, musical champions like Marcia Ball, and grassroots change makers like the New Georgia Project and People's Action. The Lowdown Happy Hour is reaching out to you to help put the move in movement. So grab a libation and join the fun. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day Consumers Power Company employees near Flint, Michigan, shut off generators and turbines at the Zilwaukee Power Plant. 2,000 workers organizing with the Public Utilities Union under the direction of the UAW effectively cut off power to everything except hospitals, city sanitation plants, and dairies. The company's office workers joined the walkout, hanging a banner across the Flint District office building that read, "Quit stalling." The company had dragged its heels on an agreement promising union recognition, a closed shop, wage increases, and an end to 24-hour scheduling of troubleshooters. The strike cut power to an estimated 165,000 Flint residents. It also forced the closing of 6 area General Motors plants and impacted industrial centers like Saginaw and Bay City. The strike ended a temporary truce that Governor Frank Murphy had forced between the UAW and Consumers Power, which ended a several-hour-long walkout at the power plant earlier in the month. The strike paralyzed 13 counties across the Saginaw Valley. When news of the second strike hit, Murphy put the National Guard on standby. He snapped orders at UAW leader Homer Martin to get those lights back on. I will not stand by and see those people in darkness tonight. Top union officials insisted the strike was unauthorized and that a tentative settlement had been reached. But workers demanded to see the actual terms of the agreement before they agreed to go back to work. The workers ratified the contract. Tensions continued. Governor Murphy demanded that the county sheriff organize a special force to prevent future utility strikes, while the UAW vowed to curb wildcat strikes through investigation and discipline. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of, maybe 68 to 70 or so, and a mix of clouds and sun this morning, followed by increasing clouds with showers developing this afternoon, and we had earlier forecast of thunder showers, but maybe it will just be showers. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and it looks like we're expecting just a tad less than 1/10 of an inch. Cloudy skies early overnight, then partly cloudy after midnight. Lows in the low to mid-40s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And, about a 0.25% chance of rain. And then tomorrow, a mix of clouds and sun early, then becoming cloudy later in the day. Just a very small chance of rain. Highs in the low 70s, winds out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated from the weekend totals. We didn't have an accurate total for Tuesday, but it has been updated overnight. And we have now increased confirmed cases to 11,350 and added one more deceased, which now stands at 146. Wear your masks. Wash your hands. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 24 parts per million, but that daytime UV index is very high at 9, so take care. Slather on the SP50. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And everybody knows that's the Weather Underground. Everybody should. London is 78 and sunny. Paris is 80 degrees and sunny. Rome is 79 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 71 and fair. Kabul is 86 and fair. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 48 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy with a fog advisory on the bay and offshore, so small craft and all other craft take care. And New York, New York. Is this scorching 81 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny? Well, it's nice in the Big Apple. I might as well have one of those personal fans. And that is Weather from Around the World, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Edith M. Lederer of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The UN Security Council gave its unanimous backing to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his second term, assuring his election as the next UN chief by the General Assembly, most likely on June 18th. The 15 council members adopted a brief resolution by acclamation and approved a communique at a brief private meeting endorsing Guterres, the only candidate to be the world's top diplomat for another 5 years starting on January 1st. Guterres called the council's decision a great honor and said in a statement, "I would be deeply humbled if the General Assembly were to entrust me with responsibilities of a secret mandate." He said, "It has been an immense privilege to serve we the peoples," the opening words of the UN Charter during the past 4.5 years when we have been facing so many complex challenges.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mike Corder of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Ratko Mladic, the military chief known as the Butcher of Bosnia for orchestrating genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in the Balkan nations' 92 to 95 war, lost his final legal battle yesterday, Tuesday, when UN judges rejected his appeals and affirmed his life sentence. The ruling involving his 2017 convictions and sentence closed a grim chapter in European history that included the continent's first genocide since World War II. The 1995 Srebrenica massacre of more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys. The 79-year-old former general is the last major figure to face justice from the conflict that ended more than a quarter century ago. And good riddance. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.